It certainly is a strange phenomenon that all the artists, poets, musicians, painters are unfortunate in material things, the happy ones as well. What you said lately about Guy de Maupassant is a fresh proof of it. That brings up again the eternal question. Is life completely visible to us? Or isn't it rather that this side of death we see one hemisphere only?
Van Gogh stayed in The Hague for about 2 years. During this period, his relation with his father ruptured apart, and he resorted in renting him a small art studio, bought his own basic furniture, and diligently looked to expand his professional circle with a number of fellow artist friends. Painting is the fifth career choice that Van Gogh has chose during his lifetime, and this time he was determined to walk through it till the end.
If that were fitting at the present time, a village clergyman or a schoolmaster, be, and given the present time, that's the form that seems to me to be the most fitting. Be a painter, and in so doing as a person, you will, after that spell of years of outdoor life and manual work, as a person you will, in the end, and in the passage of years, gradually become something better and deeper. I firmly believe this.
Van Gogh's unrequited love with his cousin Gogh has led to the falling out with the rest of his family. In desperation, Vincent traveled to The Hague, but sentimental love rejection did not affect his feelings for art. Vincent was luckily born into an artistic family that encounters art in many areas, and in The Hague, Vincent had abundant resources to help him start his dreams to paint. One of Vincent's cousin-in-law, Anton Mauve, was officially the first person to introduce the real world of art to Van Gogh. Mauve was a very prominent figure in The Hague School of Art. He had generously helped Van Gogh with lending him money, giving him painting supplies, introduced Vincent to some very important artists from The Hague school circles. Mauve also gave Vincent enormous encouragement and personal instructions in water and oil painting techniques. To someone like Van Gogh, who has just embarked on the road of becoming an artist, these help were of tremendous importance and value.
Mauve said, I always thought you a dullard, but now I see that it is not so. And I can assure you that this simple word of Mauve pleased me more than a cartload full of Jesuitical compliments would have done. I cannot tell you how kind and friendly Mauve and Jet are to me these days. And Mauve has shown and told me things which, of course, I cannot do at once, but which I shall gradually put into practice. But I must work very hard.
However, the warm-hearted Mauve that Vincent often praised in his letters to Theo had gradually become indifferent and rather desolate. Van Gogh had his own speculation and thought the reason to be his own newly formed sentimental relationship.
Last winter I met a pregnant woman, deserted by the man whose child she carried. A pregnant woman who had to walk the streets in winter, had to earn her bread, you understand how. I took this woman for a model, and I've worked with her all winter. I could not pay her the full wages of a model, but that did not prevent my paying her rent, and, thank God, so far I have been able to protect her and her child from hunger and cold by sharing my own bread with her. When I met this woman, she attracted my attention because she looked ill. I made her take baths and as much nourishing food as I could afford, and she has become much stronger.
This woman mentioned in Van Gogh's letters was actually a street prostitute called Siens. At the time when the two was acquainted, Siens has a 5-year-old daughter and was also pregnant. As you can imagine, falling in love with a prostitute alone would have been unbearable news for his middle-class family, not to mention that she was pregnant with an unknown father. Therefore, Vincent had to explain his relationship with convincing reasoning.
Well, gentlemen, I will tell you, you who prize good manners and culture, and rightly so, if only it be the true kind, which is the more delicate, refined manly, to desert a woman, or to stand by a forsaken woman?
So that's the way he looked upon it. But the family, of course, thought differently because, for instance, in the case of Sien Hoornik, she was a prostitute. And the father, of course, didn't understand that. But Van Gogh thought differently. He thought, there's a wife and there's somebody I can save. There's somebody I'm helping. So that's noble. So he didn't understand why the other persons were creating such a fuss.
Family's rejection of the unwelcomed relationship with Siens has once again confirmed to Van Gogh that his own faith during times of struggle is strikingly different from that of his father's while preaching on the church stand. He claimed in his letters that these poor girls are all his sisters.
Often when I walked the streets, quite lonely and forlorn, half ill and in misery, without money in my pocket, I looked after them and envied the man who could go with them, and I felt as if those poor girls were my sisters in circumstances and experience. And, you see, it's an old feeling of mine and is deeply rooted. Even as a boy I often looked up with infinite sympathy, with respect even, into a half-faded woman's face on which was written, as it were, life in its reality has left its mark here.
Despite family's opposition, Van Gogh decided stubbornly to live with the street prostitute Siens. From the year 1881 to the autumn of 1883, Van Gogh spent most of his time together with this woman, and that was the only time and the closest to living with his own family during his entire life.
Well, I do hope, brother, that you do not think evil of Siens and me. She has learned to put up with my disagreeable side, and in many ways she understands me better than others. If I go into a rage once in a while, either about the posting or something else, she knows how to take it, and has seen that it soon passes.
Siens, alongside her daughter and her mother, became the Van Gogh's most dedicated models throughout his time spent in Den Haag. Van Gogh painted over 30 paintings of Siens-related practice drawings. One of the paintings was particularly famous, called Sorrow.
Now I have finished 2 drawings. First, Sorrow, but in a larger size, only the figure without any surroundings. The pose has been changed a little. The hair falls over the shoulder partly in a plait, and the figure has been drawn more carefully. The other, the roots, represents some 3 roots on a sandy ground. Here I try to put the same sentiment into the landscape as I put into the figure. The convulsive, passionate, clinching to the earth, and yet being half torn up by the storm.
At the same time, Van Gogh's amorous feelings towards Siens gradually developed deeper. He was even determined to cut off all ties with his haughty middle-class family in order to pursue this unfortunate woman and eventually make her his bride.
He came back for Christmas, and then everything went wrong because he didn't want to go. Well, he didn't want to attend church, and well, in other families you might say, oh, well, then you stay at home. But of course, when you're the son of a Protestant minister itself, and you not show up in church in front of all the other people, it's a big loss of the family itself. So they have to face the community, and that's where the trouble starts. When he's stubborn, so he just simply doesn't go and then leaves home, and that aggravates, you might say, afterwards. Every time he gets back, there is always trouble with his father because he has to do this thing and that thing, and he has to behave and things like that.
Van Gogh has once mentioned in his letter that the feelings he had for Siens was not so much pure love, but rather a profound mutual understanding for each other. Both of them have endured such extreme sufferings, and their torture fate have tied them together, creating a tacit understanding for each other. A partnership that those who are well-fed, well-sheltered may not even be able to interpret.
In love affairs, I do not know whether you have yet learned its ABC. Do you think that's pretentious of me? My meaning is that one feels best what love is when sitting near a sick bed, sometimes without a cent of money in one's pocket. When I learned to know her better, it became clear to me that if I wanted to help her, I must do it seriously. Then I spoke frankly to her and said, so and so are my opinions on things. In this and this way I understand your position and mine. I am poor, but I am no seducer. Do you think you can put up with me? Otherwise it ends now. Then she said, I will stay with you, though you be ever so poor.
Although homelessly drowned in Siens, Van Gogh was also diligently learning painting skills. During the summer of 1882, Van Gogh completed his first watercolor painting. In the same year, his art dealer uncle, Uncle Cor, also placed an order of 12 small scenery paintings of The Hague. Despite intolerant of Van Gogh's deviant behavior in sleeping with a prostitute, Theo never ceased his financial support to his brother. Relying on Theo's supply of cash, Van Gogh and Siens and the entire family lived on, depending heavily on each other. In spite of all that, Van Gogh did not receive financial aid without any sense of guilt. That's why he always emphasized on how hard he was at work to justify him receiving monthly support.
You should know that at present I am working out of doors, as early as 4 o'clock in the morning. In the daytime it is too difficult to work in the street because of the passers-by and the street urchins. This is also the finest moment to see the main outlines, when everything is in tone. When I wrote you about the middle of May, I had only 3 or 3.5 guilders left after I had paid the baker. And I have had hardly anything to eat, but dry black bread with some coffee, and scene too.
However, good days don't last. It was not long before Van Gogh and Siens' relationship became dysfunctional. Minor details from Van Gogh's letters giving subtle indications about Siens' unstable emotional swings. Her bad temper was noticed, and as a result, Van Gogh lost hope in changing her for any better. On the other hand, Theo constantly pressured Van Gogh in leaving Siens and her family behind, which resonated with Van Gogh's ambitions for his painting career. In other words, he did not want to abandon Theo's financial support. As their chapter came to an end in 1883, Van Gogh bottled up his miscellaneous emotions and left Den Haag during autumn's falling leaves. Siens sent him off at the train station, where Van Gogh's next destination awaits him in Drath.
She was from the lower classes. I don't think on an intellectual level they were equal. She, although when they started to live together it was pretty sure, I think, that she had left the business, so to say, and later on it was not totally sure whether she did or not. There were quarrels with the family behind her, so in the end it simply didn't work out, which you could have predicted from the beginning, I think, but nevertheless Van Gogh didn't look upon it that way.
You wrote to me recently, perhaps your duty will induce you to behave differently or something. That's something I immediately thought about a great deal, and because my work so undoubtedly demands the step of going there, it's my understanding that work is more directly duty than even the woman, and that the former mustn't suffer for the sake of the latter. Which was different last year, since in my view I am now exactly at the point of Drenthe. But one has divided feelings and would like to do both, which cannot be in the circumstances, both because of the money and more than that, because she can't be counted on.
In the end, Van Gogh did not manage to form a family with Siens. He chose to continue with his painting career, a more responsible choice, appearing to him. Will he regret for this decision? The most well-known works of Van Gogh were created during his stay in France, but the Netherlands have always been the place where his artistic career began. Where can we trace Van Gogh's footsteps in the Netherlands? How did he improve his painting skills in his home country? Please keep with us for our next episode of the story of Vincent van Gogh.